Chapter 17. That night the dream call had came back, rushing like a torrent through his troubled sleep. It was Mungo's fault. Even deep in sleep he blamed him. He hadn't had the nightmare for so long, until now. Only this time it was different. It was much worse. Someone else was in the water with him, trapped under the ice, arms flailing wildly, reaching out to him, trying to pull him down deeper. Suddenly, it was Dominic. But this time he couldn't save him. They were both helpless. Then Dominic's frightened face shimmered into that of Claus, a disappointed Claus, wanting Coll to help him too, and knowing now he couldn't. Coll tried to turn away, angry that everyone wanted his help, yet there was no one to help him. Then, suddenly, it wasn't Claus or Dominic whose face floated airily into the depths. It was Mungo, who was reaching out to him, but not for help. He wanted to pull him down into the murky, icy water, and for the first time in his life, Coll was afraid, really afraid of his brother. He held himself awake as Mungo clawed towards him, almost reaching him, almost touching him, the smile becoming a skeleton's grin. No! He bolted upright in his bed. He was bathed in sweat. His heart was thumping in terror. He never wanted to sleep again. His mother had heard him yell and burst into his room, pulling on her dressing gown. "Coll, are you all right, son?" She sat on the bed beside him, holding his shoulders. "Did you have another nightmare?" Coll nodded, wiping his brow with the edge of the sheet. He wanted so much to spill the whole story out to his mother, but it was an unwritten law that the brothers never involved Mam in anything. She was never to be involved in anything Mungo got up to, never expected to provide an alibi. Yet she knew all about the break-in at Samson's, and Coll was convinced that she knew that Mungo was responsible. Coll had been disappointed when she didn't challenge him about it, hadn't been angry with him. It was as if what Mungo did was his business and not hers. But it was her business. She was their mother. She was supposed to be able to say anything to them. For the first time in his life, another first, he resented his mother. She should stand up for Coll, stand up for something. In the dim light from the hallway, he looked at her for the first time, slim and blonde, with black roots showing that they always teased her about. She'd never questioned Mungo's behaviour, or Coll's. They were her boys, and if they did wrong, she didn't want to know about it. And that wasn't the way it should be. Mrs. Samson wouldn't have kept silent. Somehow he couldn't imagine any of the Samsons in this kind of situation, but he was sure Mrs. Samson would never allow Dominic or Ella to do something bad and her not say anything about it. His mother, unaware of these thoughts, said, "What if I sleep in here the night? I wrap up in a duvet and snuggle down in the chair. Then, if you have another bad dream, I'll be right there beside you." Coll felt a rush of guilt. A wave of love for her flooded over him. He wanted to hug her, but they weren't a hugging kind of family. Mungo was right. He was getting more like the Samsons. "No, Mam, honest," he said softly. "I'll be fine now. You get back to bed. You've got work in the morning." He was sure the dream would come again after she left. He tried to force himself to stay awake, but eventually sleep did come. Deep, dreamless sleep. The police came the next day to interview Mungo. As they questioned him, he leaned back against the mantelpiece, master of his own house. Coll watched through a crack in the door, listening to his brother throw out one well-rehearsed line after another. Once it would have made him laugh watching Mungo run rings round the cops. Now it only made him angry. One of the policemen glanced towards the open door. "Is that you, Col? Why don't you come in and join us?" Mungo stood erect. "Hey, you leave my wee brother out of this." The policeman looked at Mungo as if he had just crawled out from under a rock. "What are you so worried about, Mr. McCann? You've got 6 people to alibi you. You were nowhere near the scene of the crime. We only want to say hello to Col. The Sampsons were, I believe, good to him. Fond of him even." He looked straight at Col now as he stepped warily into the room. "You saw what the burglars did in that house, Col. You're probably as determined as we are to catch whoever could do such a terrible thing to such a nice family. Isn't that right?" Col felt his face go red. They knew Mungo was the culprit. They knew Col knew it too. They were testing him, testing his loyalty. But to who? Mungo? The Sampsons? Col shook his head. "I wish I knew who did it." He blurted the words out, not looking at Mungo or the police. "But I haven't got a clue." "But if you did know, you would tell us," the other policeman said. Col felt Mungo's eyes burn into him, waiting for his answer. Col was angry. Angry at them all. "How would I ever find that out? I'm not a detective. I'm just a boy." He hated going back to school on Monday. News of the break-in had swept round the town. No one wanted to talk about London. It was as if it never happened. Paul Baxter avoided him in the corridor, didn't ask for an interview, didn't ask for an article. They all assumed he had been some kind of accessory. They all assumed his brother had been responsible. Denny thought the whole thing was exciting and dangerous. Just what he'd come to expect of the McCanns. He wanted to know all the details. It was all he wanted to talk about. Finally, Col couldn't take any more. "It wasn't Mungo that did it, right? Get that into your thick skull, Denny. He wouldn't do that to friends of mine, or to me, and I had nothing to do with it either." Denny took a step back, surprised at his outburst. "Well, that's not what everyone's saying." "Well, they're wrong. And if I hear you spreading that about, I'll belt you." "You'll belt me?" Denny looked alarmed and puzzled. "You've changed, Col. I think you went into that loch as Col, and you came out as somebody else entirely." As Denny stalked away from him, Col shouted, "Maybe this is the real me then." "I think you've changed for the better." He turned at the unmistakably husky voice of Blakey. Her hair was even blacker than usual, standing out in spikes round her head, like a char-grilled Statue of Liberty. "What do you mean, I've changed for the better?" Blakey shrugged, blew a fat, slow bubble, sucked it back into her mouth before she answered. "You're easier to talk to, nicer. Everyone says it, not just me." She chewed thoughtfully. "Even Mrs. Holden's getting to like you." That was true, and it was strange that Blakey, of all people, should have noticed it. He smiled at her. She smiled back. Her face was so white her teeth looked jello. "See," she said, "you've never smiled at me in your life." "I wish you'd wash all that muck off your face, Blakey. You'd be a real cracker if you didn't wear all that makeup." For a minute, he was sure she was going to spit her chewing gum at him, but then she smiled again. "If you say Mungo didn't do it, I'll believe you." In that second, Col realised he wanted to tell her everything. He needed someone to confide in. Maybe Blakey was the one. She would listen. She would understand. But the moment passed as Col heard a familiar excited voice calling him from across the playground. Call! Call! It was Dominic, jumping about at the school gates, and with him, looking grim, was Mr. Sampson.